Hey guys, so I'm not even going to overhype this one. These stories are just genuinely weird. They're just uncomfortable. Like the more you think about them, the worse they get. If you've got a story you want to share, feel free to send it in. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Zoe. I used to order food a lot more than I should have. That's the easiest way to start this, even though it doesn't feel important at first. I lived alone and worked late hours, so ordering dinner just became part of my routine. Some nights it was the only real interaction I had with anyone. You open the app, pick something, wait, eat, clean up, go to bed. I didn't think about it beyond that. The house was a single-story place, kind of narrow, like everything was in a line. Front door straight into the living room, then a short hallway to the bedroom and bathroom, kitchen off to the side. It wasn't old, but it had that feeling of a place that had seen different people come and go without anyone really caring too much. I was pretty strict about locking the door. That's something I've always been like, even before this happened. Not paranoid, just habit. I'd come in, lock the deadbolt, push the door once with my shoulder to make sure it caught. It's muscle memory more than anything. I remember doing it that night because I remember having my keys in my hand and putting them on the little hook by the door, and I don't do that unless I've already locked up. If the door's unlocked, the keys stay in my hand until I fix it. That night, I got home from work later than usual, tired, kind of irritated at nothing specific. I reheated some leftovers first, then decided I still wanted something sweet, which is how I ended up ordering delivery instead of just going to bed. I remember thinking it was a waste of money, but I did it anyway. While I was waiting, I was folding laundry in the bedroom. I didn't even finish it. I just dumped clean clothes on the bed and picked through them for what I needed the next day. Some of them were still kind of warm from the dryer earlier. That probably matters later. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know why my brain keeps going back to that. The delivery app notification went off while I was in the bathroom. I heard the little chime and ignored it at first, because it usually takes a few minutes after that before they actually show up. When I checked my phone, it said the order had been delivered and there was a photo attached. That part is normal too. They always take a picture of the food at the door. But when I opened the photo, the front door was in the picture, but it wasn't closed all the way. It was open just a little. Not enough to see inside, but enough that I could tell it wasn't shut. The porch light was on, and I could see the edge of my living room rug through the crack. I was thinking, that's weird, but not immediately jumping to anything extreme. My first thought was honestly that I'd rushed and hadn't pulled it shut properly. Even though I was sure I had locked it, there was still that little voice saying, "You probably messed up. You're tired. You always think you're more careful than you are." I just walked down the hallway toward the front door. I was trying to be quiet without really thinking about it, stepping softer than usual, like the house might hear me. The door was closed when I got there. Fully closed. Locked. I checked it twice. The deadbolt was turned all the way like it should be. I stood there with my hand still on the knob, just listening. No movement, no sound. I opened the door and grabbed the food, brought it inside, locked the door again. I remember checking the frame, the hinges, like something might look different if I stared long enough. Everything looked the same as it always had. I told myself the photo angle probably made it look open, or the driver nudged it and it swung a little and then shut again. There were a lot of explanations that didn't involve anything bad. I wanted one of those to be true, so I went with that. I ate in the living room, TV on low, barely paying attention. I kept glancing at the front door, though. I don't usually do that. After a while, I noticed I was doing it and felt kind of stupid, like I was scaring myself for no reason. I went to bed later than I meant to. Slept badly. Kept waking up for no clear reason, heart racing, then calming down again. By morning, the whole thing felt smaller, like something I'd overreacted to. I probably would have forgotten about it completely if it weren't for the camera. I had a security camera set up in the living room, mostly because my parents insisted when I moved out on my own. It wasn't one of those fancy systems, just a single camera that recorded motion and stored clips in the cloud. I mostly used it to check on packages if I was out of town. I almost never watched the footage. That morning, while I was getting ready for work, the delivery photo popped back into my head. I don't know why it bothered me again all of a sudden. Maybe because I was leaving the house and locking the door and thinking about it more. Before I left, I opened the camera app on my phone and scrolled back to the previous night. The living room was empty, lights off, just shadows shifting when cars passed outside. I fast-forwarded, skipping ahead in chunks until I got close to the delivery time. That's when I saw him. He wasn't fully in frame. That's the part that still messes with me the most. He was standing just at the edge of what the camera could see, like he knew exactly where to stand to avoid being recorded properly. I could see part of his shoulder and side and a bit of his head. He was wearing something dark. I couldn't tell. His face was covered with a dark mask. It didn't look like it was meant to be comfortable. He stood there completely still. Then he moved forward and the front door opened inward. I remember whispering no out loud. He went inside. The way he moved wasn't rushed. That's important. It wasn't like someone breaking in quickly, grabbing something and running. He stepped in like he belonged there, like it was his space. He closed the door behind him. The camera didn't capture much after that because of the angle, but I could hear him. The audio picked up this low, constant talking. Just talking, like someone having a conversation with themselves. I couldn't make out all the words, but it sounded casual, almost bored. At one point, I think he laughed. He was inside for like 2 minutes. It felt longer watching it, but when I checked the timestamp, it wasn't that long. Then the door opened again, and he left. His arms were full of clothes. My clothes. I recognized a shirt right away, one with a faded logo that I'd had since college. There were others too, bunched up, some slipping out of his grip. He closed the door behind him again. A few seconds later, the delivery driver showed up. My hands were shaking. I called the police. The police watched the footage with me inside the house. I went through the bedroom while they were there and realized how many clothes were gone. Not valuables, just worn, dirty laundry, stuff that still smelled like me. It was probably someone who'd been watching the house for a while. They couldn't find him. There were no clear fingerprints, no usable face from the camera. The mask hid everything. I didn't stay there much longer after that. I moved out as soon as my lease allowed. I was working inventory and cleanup at a small home goods warehouse. It paid steady, and I didn't have to deal with customers much. I clocked out around 12:30 a.m., sometimes closer to 1 if we were behind. I lived alone. I'd grown up about 40 minutes away in a rural area where houses were spread far apart and everyone knew everyone's last name. My parents still lived there. I was an only child. No siblings, no half-siblings, no secret adoptions, nothing complicated like that. Just me. That night, I got in my car, sat there for a minute like I always did, letting the engine warm up while I scrolled on my phone. Then I pulled out of the lot and headed toward the main road. It's a long stretch of 2-lane highway bordered by trees and empty fields. At that hour, you usually see maybe 1 or 2 other cars. About 5 minutes into the drive, I saw headlights behind me. I didn't think much of it. Someone else was heading toward town. That's all. The first turn toward my neighborhood came up, and I slowed down like I always did. The car slowed too. Still nothing unusual. The second turn came about half a mile later. They followed that one as well. I remember glancing at my rearview mirror a little longer, trying to make out the shape of the car. It looked older, dark-colored, boxy, nothing flashy. I told myself not to assume anything. Subdivisions don't have many entry points. If someone lives near you, you're going to take the same turns. By the third turn, though, my stomach felt slightly tight. I sped up a little. The car stayed behind me at the same distance. I slowed down again. Same distance. I decided to test it. Instead of turning onto my street, I kept driving and pulled into a small gas station near the entrance of the neighborhood. It was technically open 24 hours, but after midnight it felt half abandoned. Bright white lights, one employee behind thick glass, empty parking lot. I parked near the front and shut off my engine. The car pulled in too. It didn't park right next to me. It stopped a few spaces away at an angle, like the driver wasn't fully committing to a spot. I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, but not clearly enough to make out details. We sat there. I started my car again and pulled back out. The car followed. That's when I stopped trying to rationalize it. My chest felt tight in a way that made breathing feel slightly deliberate, like I had to think about it. I drove straight home. When I turned onto my street, I didn't look back again. I pulled into my driveway faster than usual, grabbed my keys, and went straight to the front door. I fumbled with the lock, which annoyed me because my hands weren't even shaking that badly, but it felt like they were slower than normal. Once inside, I locked the door and stepped toward the small window beside it. The car had stopped at the end of the street. Its headlights were off. It wasn't parked along the curb like someone visiting a neighbor. It was just sitting there at the corner, dark. I stood there watching it for what felt like a full minute. Then I heard a car door close. A moment later, I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. The porch creaked under someone's weight. Then knocks on my door. A man's voice said my first name. Hearing my name like that through the door in the middle of the night felt worse than the knocking itself. It was just spoken normally, like someone greeting you. He said my name again and told me to open the door. I forced myself to speak and asked, "Who are you?" There was a pause long enough that I wondered if he'd left. Then he said, "I'm a friend of your brother." I said, "I don't have a brother." Then he said calmly, "You do. You just don't remember." That didn't make sense. I grew up an only child. There's no confusion about that. I told him to leave and said I would call the police if he didn't. He just stood there, and then I heard the porch creak again as he stepped away. Through the window, I watched him walk back to the car. He looked like an ordinary man. He got in, started the engine, and drove off. I called my mom. She immediately said I should have called the police. She asked if I recognized him. I said no. She asked what he looked like. I realized I couldn't describe him well at all. We went back and forth about it. She sounded shaken. I told her it was nothing. The next day I went to work earlier and asked if I could switch to earlier shifts permanently. That second night, around 2 in the morning, I heard something outside. It sounded like a soft scrape along the side of the house. I heard my name again, muffled through the wall. It made me feel lightheaded. I got up and walked quietly into the hallway. Through the front window, I saw the same car parked down the street with its headlights off. He was walking around the side of my house. I grabbed my phone, called 911. While it rang, I heard him near the back door. I heard the handle move slightly, like someone testing it. Then he started talking. He said my name. He said my mom's name. He said my dad's name. He said the name of the road I grew up on. He said the name of my elementary school. Then he started saying smaller things, like the color of my childhood bedroom walls. None of that information was online. It wasn't the kind of thing you could find through a simple search. I was crouched on the living room floor whispering to the dispatcher while he walked around the house, touching windows, testing doors. He kept speaking in a calm tone, like he was reminding me of shared memories. He said, "You don't remember me, but I remember you." He never said his own name. Police lights flashed through the front window. I heard him run. My parents drove down immediately. My mom cried as soon as she saw me. Dad checked every lock like that could undo what had happened. We went through every possible person who might know those details. Old neighbors, family friends, distant relatives, no one matched. I moved out within 2 weeks and stayed with my parents for about a month. It's been years now. I don't drive late at night unless I absolutely have to. When I do, I pay attention to headlights behind me longer than most people probably would. I still think about the way he spoke. He didn't sound angry or unstable. He sounded familiar, like he genuinely believed he belonged in my life. I wonder if he confused me with someone else, if he knew me when I was young and I blocked it out somehow. Sometimes I think he was lying about everything just to scare me, but that doesn't explain how he knew those specific details. My parents still don't know who he was. The police never found him. When I try to lay them next to each other, there are gaps I can't explain. I don't live there anymore, but it's not far. So, I was living alone in a big apartment complex, kind of wedged between a commercial strip and a wooded stretch that nobody ever developed. If you drove past it, you'd think it was just another cluster of beige buildings with balconies and identical windows. That's basically what it was. A lot of units, multiple floors, long interior hallways. I moved there because it was cheap for the size. One bedroom, decent square footage, small balcony, and management didn't ask too many questions. I worked evenings at the time, just enough to cover rent and food. My schedule was inconsistent, which meant some nights I'd get home at midnight, some nights at 3 in the morning, some nights I'd be home all evening. I didn't have a routine that made sense to other people, but it made sense to me. I kept to myself. I nodded to neighbors in the hallway, maybe exchanged a few words if we were both waiting for the elevator. But that was it. I couldn't tell you most of their names. I didn't really want to. My unit was at the far end of the 3rd floor, last door on the left. I remember liking that when I moved in because it meant nobody walked past my door unless they lived on that end. Less foot traffic, less noise. I've always been sensitive to sound, especially when I'm trying to sleep. The layout inside was simple. You opened the front door into a short entry area, then the living room opened up. Kitchen was off to the right, bedroom down a small hallway, bathroom next to it. Nothing fancy. Brown carpet, off-white walls, the kind of place where you can tell 100 people have lived there before you. Most nights, I locked the door out of habit, not because I was especially afraid of anything. It was just something I grew up doing. Lock door, check stove, turn off lights. Automatic. The night everything started, I had worked late. The kind of tired where your body feels heavy, but your brain won't fully shut down. I ate something quick and eventually went to bed. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. I didn't check my phone right away. I just know it was still dark, and the building was quiet in that deep, empty way it gets in the middle of the night. What woke me wasn't a loud bang. It was the sound of metal moving. I thought I was dreaming. That happens to me sometimes. I'll hear something in a dream that blends into real sound. It took a few seconds for my brain to put together what I was hearing. Someone was trying to unlock my door. The sound of a key sliding into the lock, turning slightly, pulling back out, and then trying again. I stayed still in bed. I didn't sit up. I didn't move my arms. I just listened. There was a pause, and then a voice, almost conversational. "This is my unit." It wasn't panicked. It sounded confused, but calm. I was thinking that maybe someone was drunk and had the wrong floor or wrong building. That kind of thing happens, but it didn't feel like that. The voice was too steady. I slowly sat up and reached for my phone. The screen lit up the room just enough for me to see my bedroom door. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want whoever was out there to know I was awake. The clicking started again. Key in, turn, stop, pull out, try again. "This is my unit," the voice said again. I got out of bed and moved toward the bedroom door as quietly as I could. Nothing changed outside. I made my way down the short hallway to the front door. My hands felt strange, like they weren't fully connected to me. Kind of numb, but shaky at the same time. There was a peephole in the door. I leaned in and looked. There was a man standing in the hallway. I had never seen him before. He was like in his 30s or 40s, medium build. His hood was down. He was holding a phone in one hand and a small set of keys in the other. He kept looking at his phone, then at my door, then back at his phone. He didn't look angry. He didn't look aggressive. He looked genuinely confused. "This is my unit," he said again, this time more to himself than to anyone else. I stood there, staring at him through the peephole, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to speak, to say, "You have the wrong apartment." Another part of me was terrified that if I made any noise, something would change. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, he stopped trying the lock. He stared at his phone for a few seconds, then slowly turned and walked down the hallway toward the elevator. I waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. Then I slid down against the door and sat on the floor. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I called the leasing office. I told them what happened. I expected them to say something like, "Oh yeah, someone just moved in and got confused," or "maintenance gave someone the wrong keys," or something along those lines. The woman I spoke to put me on hold for a few minutes. When she came back, she told me that no one new had moved in on my floor. Not recently, not in the past several months. I asked if any units had been broken into, or if anyone else reported something similar. She said no. I didn't know what to say to that. I asked if it could have been someone from another floor who got mixed up. She said maybe, but their system didn't show any recent move-ins in the entire building. She suggested I file a police report if I felt unsafe. I didn't. For a while after that, I became more careful. I double-checked my lock before bed. I bought a cheap door stopper and wedged it under the door at night. Nothing else happened for a couple weeks. Then came the night I don't remember. I had gone out driving. I do that sometimes when I can't sleep or when my head feels crowded. I remember leaving the apartment. I remember getting into my car. I remember driving. After that, things get fuzzy. The next clear memory I have is waking up in a hospital bed. At first, I didn't know where I was. Everything smelled like disinfectant. My mouth felt dry. My head felt heavy, like it was filled with wet sand. A nurse asked my name. I told her. She asked if I knew what day it was. I didn't. She told me I'd been brought in by ambulance. I asked why. She said I had been found unconscious near my apartment complex. Not inside it. Near it. In the wooded area behind the buildings. I didn't understand that. I still don't. I had some injuries. Nothing life-threatening, apparently. Bruises. A mild concussion. A deep ache in my ribs that made it hurt to breathe too deeply. I asked what happened to me. They told me they didn't know. No one had witnessed anything. Someone driving past had seen me lying near the edge of the trees and called 911. I tried to remember. I couldn't. It wasn't like there was a blank spot where something obvious should be. It was more like the memory just stopped, like a tape that had been cut. My apartment was trashed, rotten, foul, thick in the air. It smelled like someone had used the bathroom all over my living room and just left it there. Nothing valuable seemed to be missing, but furniture had been moved. Couch cushions were on the floor. My bedroom looked like someone had gone through every drawer and dumped the contents out. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Bed sheets were half pulled off. There were dark smears on the carpet in a few places. I don't know what they were. Police looked around, but no luck. To this day, I don't know what happened.